Daf Ayin Vav Amid Aleph will begin Ayin Hey Amid Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. When making an Eruv Chatzeros, the Eruv, the bread, has to be put in a house, in one of the houses that open into the Chatzer. A Eruv cannot be put in a Beishar, in a gateway. So what happens if you have the following scenario? Zog the Gemara Amar of Nachman Amar Baravua Amar Beis Chatzeros v'Gimel Batim Beinehem. If you have 2 Chatzeros and there's 3 houses, a row of 3 houses between them. So one house opens to one Chatzer, the other house opens to the other Chatzer, and there's the middle house that opens into the houses on each side. So the one on one side, he goes through one of the houses, puts the Eruv in the middle one. And similarly, the one on the other side as well. He goes through the house that's in the middle, and that opens to it rather, and he goes through that house and puts the Eruv in the middle. So you have 2 Chatzeros, and there's 3 houses in the middle. One goes through the house that opens into it, puts it in the middle one. The other one goes to the house that's open to it and puts it in the middle one. And therefore the Eruv is in the middle house. Ze nasa beishar lezeh, ze nasa beishar lezeh. Emsoy havle bay shamrich ba'er ve'ein tzorach litein es hapas. So therefore, because each Chatzer passes through the house that's open into it, we treat that house not as a bias, but as a Beishar. Now, a Beishar, you can't put the Eruv in a Beishar, but the Beishar does not require a shituf in the Eruv. It does not have a requirement to join in with the Eruv. So therefore, you have in this scenario, none of the 3 houses have to be mishtatef in this Eruv, because the ones that open to the Chatzer on each side, they're both considered to be a Beishar, just pass through, and therefore they have no requirement to be mishtatef in the Eruv. And the one in the middle is a house, it's not a Beishar, but the one in the middle is where the Eruv is placed. Now, the halacha is that the house in which the Eruv is placed does not have to be mishtatef with the Eruv. The bread is in that house, so it's clearly that's the house, that's what's joining everybody together, that's part of the Eruv. So therefore, in this scenario, none of the 3 houses have to be mishtatef in the Eruv. The houses on each side that open into the Chatzer are considered a Beishar. They don't have to be mishtatef, and the one in the middle, that's the house where the Eruv is placed. It doesn't have to be mishtatef either. Bodak lahu Rachba l'Rabbanan. Rachba asked a question to the Rabbanan, he tested them. He gave the following scenario. Beis Chatzeros, so Beis Batim Beinehem. And so you have the similar situation, the similar scenario that we had before, 2 Chatzeros, but there's only 2 houses between them. So if the one on this side, for instance, he passed through the house that's opened into it and put the Eruv on the house on the other end. And the one from this Chatzer, the ones from this Chatzer, they pass through the house that's open into them and put the Eruv on the other side. So each one put the Eruv in the house that's open to the other end of it. Meaning, so what they did is, they passed through the house that's next to it. They made this, therefore, a Beishar. And they also passed through the house next to them and made this into a Beishar. So the house that was opened into each Chatzer became a Beishar, a gateway for the members of the Chatzer. So it'll come out, therefore, that if you treat the house that they pass through, if you treat each house that they pass through as a Beishar, then it'll come out that the Eruv is placed in a Beishar and not in a house. Now, as we mentioned, a Eruv has to be placed in a house, not a Beishar. So then the question is, Kono Eruvayin loy. Mi mashus lahu legabe dahai bias, or legabe dahai Beishar, or legabe dahai Beishar, or legabe dahai bias. can we view this house that opens into the Chotzer, can we view it that for one party it's considered to be a house and for the other party to be a Beishar? Similarly, the house that opens into this Chotzer. Can we say that the members of the Chotzer pass through this house, for them it's considered a Beishar? They put the Erev over here. But for the members of this Chotzer, we'll treat this as a house. And similarly, on the house on the other side. Can we view this house differently for the different members of each Chotzer? For the members of each Chotzer, rather. Can we view this as for one Chotzer, for the members of one Chotzer, can we view it as a house, and it's therefore a valid Erev? And for the other for the members of the other Chotzer, to view it as a Beishar. And similarly, the house on the other side. Can we view this house differently for the members of each Chotzer? Can we say that for one Chotzer we view it as a Beishar, and for the other Chotzer we view it as a house, and it's a valid Erev? Or do we say, no, you have to either view it as a Beishar or a house? And if we view it, therefore, as a Beishar, because one Chotzer passes through it, we have to consistently and uniformly treat it as a Beishar, and therefore, for the members of the Chotzer that put their Erev there, it's not valid. Omar Alei, they said to him, Shneim Alei Kon Erev. They said, neither of them are kind of there. It's not an Erev for either one. Manushach. In Beishar Mashisle, if you treat it as a Beishar, because you say the people pass through it and it's a gatehouse, then a noisen, it can't be valid. It's not valid because we learned a noisen esiru beishar achsaru mirpesas enoi erev, and I bais mashvile kamataltal alabayis deloi maravle. And if you view it as a house, it's not valid because each chotzer would have to carry the erev through a house, and which is not joined in their erev. If you treat each of them as a house, so then the members of each chotzer, in order to get their erev, is on the other side. If you treat this as a house, they'll have to, in order to get the bread, they'll have to carry the bread through a house which is not part of their erev, so the bread is not accessible to them. And similarly, on the other side, their erev is on the house on this end. They would have to, therefore, bring their bread through a house which is not part of their, which is not joined in the erev, and therefore the bread is not accessible. So therefore, they say that you cannot treat it for one group as a Beishar and for the other group as a bias. It's either uniformly treated as a house or as a Beishar. If you treat them both as a Beishar, then the erev is not placed in a house. It's not a valid erev. If you treat it as for both as a bias, the erev is in a house, but it's not accessible because the members of the chotzer, in order to retrieve their bread, their pas, they would have to pass through and bring it through a house which is not part of their erev. Why is this different than the case of Rav? Rav said, if two people said to a person, say, go make an erev for us, for one of them, he made the erev while it was still daylight, on erev Shabbos while it was still daytime. And for the other one, he was ma'arev bein hashmashos during the period of sofek, of the twilight time. So he's ma'arev bein hashmashos. The one that he made the erev for during the daytime while it was still daytime, the erev was consumed during the bein hashmashos period. And for the one that is mar bein hashmashos, the erev was consumed when it got dark. Shneim kono erev. They're both kind of there. It's still valid for both of them. It's a valid erev. Now, it would seem to be that it's similar to our case over here, where there is an inherent contradiction. The erev has to be placed. The kshisa have to be kind of the kshisa, and the erev has to be placed while it's still before the onset of Shabbos. So how do you view this bein hashmashos, this twilight period? Do we view it as erev Shabbos or Shabbos? the Erev, you have to be kind of the Erev before Shabbos. Now, if we view the Bein Hashmoshes as being already that it's Shabbos, then you'll say that the Erev that was placed Mi'ba'ed Yom, it was Nechal Bein Hashmoshes, so it's a valid Erev. It was put there before Shabbos, and it was consumed Bein Hashmoshes. If Bein Hashmoshes is Shabbos, it was consumed after the onset of Shabbos, so it's a valid Erev. You are kind of the Erev Mi'ba'ed Yom. It's Nechal, it's eaten on Shabbos, then it's fine, it's no problem. But then you'll say for the second person, if he only was put the Erev there, Bein Hashmoshes, it's too late. He put the Erev there, Bein Hashmoshes, it's already Shabbos. The Erev, you have to be kind of the Erev before the onset of Shabbos. So then the second one should not be an Erev. Now, if we say that the Bein Hashmoshes is considered to be not Shabbos, it's considered to be Erev Shabbos, then the first one should be not the first one, therefore, should not be an Erev, because the Erev was placed there on Erev Shabbos, but if it was Nechal Bein Hashmoshes, it was consumed before Shabbos. So, if we consider the Bein Hashmoshes to be Shabbos, then we'd say that if it's Shabbos, the first one is an Eruv because it was placed before Shabbos and it was only consumed on Shabbos. The second one, we would say, is not an Eruv because then we'd say that the Eruv was placed too late. It was already placed after the onset of Shabbos. If Bein Hashmoshes is considered to be not Shabbos but Erev Shabbos, then the second one is a valid Erev and not the first one. But nevertheless, we say that they're both valid. We can view it both ways. We can view it for the first one as being Shabbos and for the second one as being Erev Shabbos. So why don't we say the same thing over here? For one, we can view it as a Beis Shar, and for the other, we view it as a house. More says, over there, whether it's day or night, is not so recognizable. So therefore, it's a D'Rabbanan Dekadin. We're Mekel by the D'Rabbanan Dekadin, and we say we're Mekel, and we can view it for one for daytime or the other one nighttime. Because it's not a clear contradiction. Now, as the Ritva explains it, he says it's not a clear contradiction because you can view it as a period of time where part of it is day, part of it is night. You can view the first part of it as being daytime and the latter part of it as being nighttime, meaning it's a twilight period, it's a Sophic period, it's not clear is it day or night, or it's not even clear if part of it is day or part of it is night. So you can view it in different ways. It's not a clear-cut contradiction. So therefore, it's loy min kramil. So valhacha ilagabe high bias, lagabe high bias, ilagabe high beishar, lagabe high, and lagabe high nami beishar. But over here, it's a clear contradiction. You have to be consistent. If to one you view it as a house, to the other one also you have to view it as a house. If to one it's a beishar, the other one also has to be a beishar. So therefore, notwithstanding this is a din d'Rabbanan, we can't be mezalzel and therefore do treat it in a way that it's an inherent contradiction. And therefore we say, notwithstanding this is Rabbanan, we have to be machmer, and the Eru is not an Eru. Hadalach hadar, hadalach hadar, hadalach hadar. Sagt the Mishnah, nu perek chaloin shebein beis chatzeros, dalar al dalar b'sei chasora marvim shtayim, v'imrosa marvim echad. If you have two chatzeros, so if there's a wall between them, a wall between them, it separates them, then they're clearly separate. They're two separate chatzeros, and therefore they cannot join together in Erev. In order to join together in Erev, there has to be a Pesach between them. So, however, if you have a chaloin, a window that's shebein beis chatzeros, that's between the two, if in the wall there's a window, there's an opening between which is at least dalet al dalet, and as b'sei chasora, it's within 10 tvachim of the ground, ma'arvim shnayim, they have an option. Ma'arvim shnayim, they can be independent, and they do not have to join together, and they do not aser on each other. But if they want to join join together, since there's a window, there's a pesach between them. If they want to join together, they could join together in one erev and carry from one to the other. So but if the opening is less than $1, or if it's not within 10 tefachim of the ground, then in that case they have to be separate. It's not considered to be that there's a Pesach between them, and they have to be marved separately. They cannot join together in an Eruv. Now we say that the window has to be dalet al dalet, 4 tefachim. Let us say perhaps that the Tana is Saisem, and not like the Chachamim, but rather like Shimon Gamliel, Damar Kol Pachs Midalik Elovadami, who says that if it's within 4 tefachim we say Lovid, because apparently the Gemara's understanding in the Havamina that the reason that the window has to be dalet al dalet, at least dalet al dalet, because if it's less than dalet al dalet, we would say lovid. We would treat it that it's joined together, that the space is connected, and therefore it's not a Pesach. And more than dalet, we don't say lovid, and therefore it's considered to be open. So it would seem to be that the Tana is Haisem like Rav Shimon Gamliel, and that's why you need an opening of at least dalet al dalet, and gimel is not sufficient. Mor says no. You can even say that it's going according to the Rabbanan. That's a machlekes of lavod. Do we say that it's connected or joined together? But l'gavi a Pesach, the Rabbanan will say no. You, notwithstanding that within Gimel is Lovid, but you need a Pesach, you need a Chashiv opening. Meaning the Rabban would say if it's more than Gimel Tefachim, it's considered to be a gap over there. It's not considered to be closed. If it's within Gimel, it's Lovid, it's considered to be closed. More than Gimel, it's not considered to be closed. But that doesn't constitute a Pesach. That does not make it into a Pesach, an opening, in order to say that the Chatzeres are open to each other, they're accessible to each other. You have to have a Pesach. A Pesach is more than just a gap. It's more than just an open space. So L'Kuli Alma, you would need an opening of at least dalet al dalet. Pochas midalet. So the Mishnah says it has to be dalet al dalet. It says if it's less than pochas midalet al dalet, if it's less than dalet al dalet or lamala miyud, then it's marvim shnaim and not echad. Frankly, more pshita came into Amar dalet al dal b'ser chasar. The reish of the Mishnah Rei told us that the Pesach has to be dalet al dal b'ser chasar. Memela ana yadana the pochas midalet lamala miyud lois. So why does the Mishnah have to reiterate in the Sefer that it can't be less or it can't be higher than yud? It's clear from the Reisha that that's a requirement. The Gemara answers, why? Where do we say that it's ma'arvin, echad and not shnayim, where it's completely above 10 from the ground? Aval miksos b'seichud marvin shnayim yiros marvin echad. The reason why it reiterates it in the Sefer is to tell me where do we say that it's not considered a Pesach and therefore you're ma'arvin shnayim echad. That's when it's pachas midal adal or lamala miyud, where it's completely, all of the Pesach is more than Yud from the ground, is higher than 10 from the ground. Meaning the Mishnah reiterates to say it's only not a Pesach if it's completely higher than 10 from the ground. But it doesn't have to be, from the ratio alone, you'd think that the entire Pesach or the entire Chaloin has to be within Yud of the ground. The Mishnah reiterates on the Sefer to tell you, no, it's not a Pesach if it's completely higher than Yud from the ground. But as long as part of it is within 10 of the ground, even if it's only part of it, a mixos, then it's still considered to be a Chaloin, a Pesach, and you have the option of Ma'arvim Shnayim, Imras Ma'arvim Echad. Tanina La, the Tan Rabbanan, this principle we see clearly from the following brayso. The Tan Rabbanan, Kulul Malam Yud, it says if the window is above Yud, Umiksos B'Seich Hasara, but a part of it, essentially it's above 10, but a bit of it, a part of it is below 10. or kula b'seich yud, essentially it's below 10. U'miksasa l'mal meyud, but a bit of it is above. Marvin Shnayim b'imrotz marvin echad. Then you have the option of b'marvin Shnayim echad. So you see clearly that as long as part of it is within 10, that's sufficient. This is clearly in the Brisa. But in fact, the Gemara, on the Lashon of the Brisa, why is it telling me both cases? Well, here you say that if essentially it's all above 10, but just a little bit is below, you have the option of being ma'arish time or echad. Well, then certainly, do you have to tell me that if it's essentially below 10, just a little bit above, is it necessary to tell me that you have the option in that case as well? The more answers, in zu ve'ein tzorach lemer zu ketane. In zu ve'ein tzorach lemer zu, that yes, it says this, and certainly in the case that's the Lashon of the Brisa, this is the style of the Tana sometimes, that zu ein tzorach lemer zu, this in the case of where it's essentially above, and certainly in the case where it's essentially below, but a bit is above, that you have the option. It says that if you have a round window, now, in order to be considered a Pesach, it has to be an area that you can square off. It can have a square of dalet al dalet. So if you have a round window, what is the circumference of the window that that you could say that you can square off a chaloin, an opening window of dalet al dalet? So Tana says you need 24 tefachim. You need 24. It has to be 24 tefachim to say that you have a Pesach of a square of dalet al dalet within that area. The Gemara will go through the mathematics of it, which it seems to be that that's much larger than is necessary. But we'll take it step by step. So you need in the circumference 24 tefachim, u'shnayim mashim masechet yud, and the bottom 2 tefachim and a bit of it have to be within 10 of the ground. And if you have that part of it 2 tefachim and a bit within 10 of the ground, then you know that part of the square, that at least part of that square is, when you square off inside the circle, then that you know that at least the bottom part of the square is within 10 of the ground. So therefore, these are the dimensions that you need. If you square it off, if you put the square in the circle, then you know that nimsa mash b'seich yud, that a bit of the square will be within yud. Why do you need such a large area, such a large circumference? Kol sheyesh be'hekeifa shloisha tvachim yesh b'reicha tefach. Well, when you take the area, the ratio of a square, and you take the width or the length of the square and compare it to the circumference, it's roughly a 3-to-1 ratio. So now, if we have a square and we have the width, then if you say this is a tefach, you'll need 3 around to have a diameter of the circle of a tefach. If I want the diameter of a circle, that it's from here to here, the diameter of the circle. If this is a tefach, right, it needs a circumference of 3. So if we're saying that the square is daled, it's 4, apparently, then it should be enough to have a circumference of 12. If I have a circle that I have from one end to the other is 4, the diameter is 4, it needs a circumference 3 times as much, roughly, approximately 3 times as much, which would be 12. If I have a square that has a length of 4, it would seem to be that you only need a circle which has a circumference of 12, and yet the Tana says 24. So why do you need 24? So mechde Kol sheyesh be'kefer shleisha tvachim, yesh be'rochav tefach. But Tresar Sagya, it should be enough to have 12. Why do I need 24? The Gemara says, no. Hani mila be'gula. Where do you say it's a 3-to-1 ratio? That's the diameter of the circle and the circumference. But here we're talking that you have to square off. Within the circle, you have to square off, make a square of 4. We're not talking about a circle which has a diameter of 4. We're talking about a circle where you can put in the circle, you can make a square within the circle. How much of the area, how much greater is the area of a square more than a circle? Revia. A square is a quarter bigger than a circle. So if you have a circle which has an area of 12, if you say that the circumference is 12, the diameter is 4. Well, in a circle, you have to have in a square rather, you have to have 25% more. When you put a circle within a square, so you have the corners, you have to square it off, so you have the corners. So now, if this is 4, this is not, actually, it's not a perfect square, but if this is 4 by 4, so that's 16. If this is a diameter of 4, the circumference is 12. So why do you need a circumference of 24 if the ratio between a square and a circle, the square is 25% more? Well, if you're saying that a diameter of 4, the circumference is 12, the circle should be 4 by 4 is 16. And so the ratio between the circle and the square, if the square is 16, so you should say over there that the circle, it should be enough to have a circumference of 16. Why do you need 24? So therefore, the Gemara, b'shitzer sagi. So the Gemara, but hani mile, where do we say that the 25% that is a discrepancy that allows for the difference? That's when you have a case. That's in a case where you have a circle in a square, like the case that we illustrated, we demonstrated. But what we require over here is the window over here is a circle. We require to be able to place a square in the circle, not a circle around the square, a square in the circle. Here you need a larger area. There's more of a discrepancy. My time because when you put the square in the circle, then you have to allow the corners. You're making the corners over here. You need a bigger circumference to be able to come around. You have to be able to come around the corners. So the circle has to be able to allow for these corners here, and therefore it has to come above and below and all around to be able to place the corners of the square in the circle. So therefore, that ratio, the 25% difference between the circle and the square, is when we're talking about putting a circle in a square. But here we're talking about putting a square in a circle, and therefore we'll need more. So the more we'll continue on this Amud, the more we'll go through the mathematics of it. But still, won't be able to allow for that much of a discrepancy, and we'll still not be able to resolve it according to the mathematics that a daled al daled, you would not need a circumference, a circle that has a circumference of 24. But we're still now going through this step. We're in the middle of it, and we'll see how we work through the process of how much you would really need to put the square of daled al daled in a circle, how large the circle has to be in order to place a square of daled al daled.